Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, has hinted that Donald Trump could be allowed back onto the platform when he fully takes over. Musk said that the lifetime ban of Trump was immoral and flat out stupid. What have you made of this, Inaya?
Yeah, I mean, what happened to all of those who said, oh, they can do what they want? It's, the leaders of Twitter and all these social media companies, it's their own platform. They can make
free market.
Exactly. They can make all of the rules. They became libertarians, in a moment. It was quite brilliant. And, in a sense, that is true. And I do also agree with Elon Musk that a lifetime ban does seem to be an extreme step. I mean, he is the former president of the United States. That seems to be a massive fact that people just don't seem to
He was president at the time.
Yeah. This is quite an important figure, to say the least. And that was one of the primary ways in which he engaged with his audience and kind of spoke to people. And I do think that's important in an age where we do have the digital public sphere, and social media plays an increasingly important role in how we kind of communicate about issues politically, for better or for worse. And now that he has been removed, it is quite remarkable. Like, you almost don't really know what he thinks on any of these issues. You have to take quite a lot of steps to actually find out what his opinion is on anything. And I think that's quite absurd for a former president. So I do agree with Elon Musk, and it also will be his platform very soon. But it just shows all of the hypocrisy of all of those who said, oh, you just need to make another platform. It's so easy, all of those kinds of things. And now they're outraged because the former president can potentially come back on Twitter.
With Trump, you now have to wait for him. He issues these sort of presidential, not quite decrees, but memos almost, where he'll boast about getting a hole in one, or he'll say the radical left is destroying the US. But it's not as fun when you can't retweet them.
No, not at all. He's, by some measures, the greatest tweeter of all time. And one of the greatest comedians of the 21st century. But it is interesting as well, because people need to remember because it's become so accepted now that he was booted off, and it's this horrible idea that he might be let back on. Sadiq Khan was in the US this week for some reason, and he was holding forth about this. It's really important that Donald Trump isn't let back on Twitter. People forget what he was kicked off Twitter for. If you read the blog post that they put up explaining it, it was down to 2 tweets, if memory serves. One of them was talking about all of the millions of patriots who had voted for him, which they said that was him glorifying the people who had stormed the Capitol, which is a bit of a stretch, unless there were millions of people there. Well, didn't see that. And then the other one was him talking about how he wasn't going to attend the inauguration, which Twitter actually said was him potentially sending a message to his supporters that the inauguration was fair game to attack. Like, these are the kind of mental gymnastics that they were trying to do. And it just speaks to the fact that at the end of the day, Twitter and Facebook and all the other platforms, they just came under enormous pressure from the corporate media, from the political class, from the all of the kind of powerful and influential sections of society to kick him off, and they basically obliged. But it was a ridiculous decision. Even Musk's predecessor, or at least the former CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, has publicly said that he regrets doing this. Because it was such a remarkable overstep for these big tech oligarchs to effectively insert themselves and assert themselves as the sort of referee of what's acceptable, not just in people shooting the shit on Twitter, but in how, as you were saying, Fraser, the sitting president communicates with the people. So, the idea of letting him back on should not be controversial. Kicking him off should be the controversial thing. And yet, this is the world we live in, unfortunately.
Obviously, we've had the sort of typical reaction. You've mentioned Sadiq Khan. The EU is not happy about this. Guy Verhofstadt of the European Parliament, who will be familiar to many from the Brexit talks, said that this is a dystopian move, potentially, and that, thank God, the European Union is stepping in to regulate social media and what you can and can't say.
I mean, it just tells you how much they fear democracy, how much they fear free speech, that the idea of just having, a platform where people can engage with different ideas and have, people that they disagree with actually express their ideas. They assume that everyone's going to become, a fanatical rioter that's going to kind of bring down, the American state. I mean, it is just frankly absurd. And we know what happened during the pandemic when you had increasing big tech regulation of how people exchanged ideas, whether that was, the so-called lab leak theory, or even, David Icke kicked off. It didn't get rid of those ideas. It pushed them underground, all of those kind of typical free speech arguments. And it actually just made people more polarized and more resentful that they couldn't actually express themselves freely. So it just seems to be, a massive, for them, that they're just frustrated that they're not going to have the ability to be able to determine what people can and can't say, or what people can and can't listen to.
And so, briefly, just on the kind of government response, we've got the Online Safety Bill in the UK, we've got the Digital Services Act in the EU, as well as other various national laws in Europe. I mean, Elon Musk is not going to save free speech, no matter what, no matter how passionate he is about it.
Yeah, no, of course, he's going to come up against those legal barriers, as you were saying. And this is one of the really difficult things, is because of the fact that, as you say, whatever he can particularly decide, he's going to come up against potentially, if the online safety bill passes, Ofcom essentially regulating platforms, being able to issue really punishing fines. I think, it's like a 5% of their kind of global takings, essentially, if they don't uphold certain standards. Obviously legal but harmful is the quite Orwellian, terrifying sort of phrase which is being bandied about in this particular space. And I think it just demonstrates that this is a really complicated issue. And the problem is that it's multifaceted. Yes, to some extent, regrettably, the state of free speech in large parts of the digital public square does rely on essentially the views and the decisions made by a very small group of very rich people. But by the same token, it's also influenced by governments who are, if anything, concerned that these big tech oligarchs aren't going far enough in terms of censoring the internet. They felt like that even before Musk was taking over. They felt like that about Jack Dorsey. They felt like that about Mark Zuckerberg. And so it just shows that this is a argument that you have to have out with in society and the culture more broadly. It's not to say that the state has no role in relation to the internet or anything like that. But if you're going to win an argument for a situation which is freer, which is genuinely a proper democratic public sphere, then it's not just about, again, shuffling the deck chairs in the C-suite. And it's certainly not about backing these very terrifying laws that these governments are pushing through now.
I think that's a really important point about, that there's no silver bullet when it comes to the problem of free speech in society. And in some senses, I kind of understand those that critique Elon Musk, just because I don't want, a CEO lecturing me about Black Lives Matter and trans issues. I also, is it really helpful to have one that just wants to own the libs as well? I still think it's a kind of, politicized platform in that sense. And actually, we have to have that argument out, in the public sphere and win the case for free speech and having a culture of freedom within wider society. And that's within education, within the universities, within the institutions across society, not just social media.